The morning Katherine Miller walked into Quinton Parker's office with his coffee order perfect down to the last detail was the morning he realized he had been watching her far more carefully than any CEO should watch their building manager. She set the cup on his desk without fanfare, just a quick, efficient motion that spoke of someone who had already handled 20 other tasks before 8 in the morning. The steam rose between them, carrying that specific scent he had mentioned exactly once 3 months ago during a facilities meeting when someone asked if the break room coffee was adequate. He had said something offhand about preferring a dark roast with a splash of oat milk and 1 pump of vanilla. Nothing more, nothing dramatic, just answering a question before moving on to discuss the broken elevator on the 4th floor. Quinton stared at the cup now, at the careful writing on the side that matched his order exactly, and felt something shift in his chest that had nothing to do with caffeine cravings. "You didn't have to do this," he said, looking up at her. Katherine was already halfway to the door, her tablet tucked under one arm and her phone buzzing with what he assumed were the dozen emergencies that seemed to follow her around the 30-story building like loyal pets. She glanced back, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. The coffee shop downstairs was running a promotion. "I was getting something anyway." That was a lie. He knew it was a lie because he had seen her drink the same thermos of home-brewed coffee every single morning for the past year. She brought it from home in a battered silver container that looked like it had survived a small war, and she never, ever bought coffee from the overpriced shop in the lobby. "Katherine," he said, and she stopped completely this time, turning to face him with those sharp green eyes that never missed anything wrong in his building. "Thank you." Her expression softened just slightly, enough that he caught a glimpse of something beyond the efficient professional mask she wore. "You're welcome, Mr. Parker." Then she was gone, and he was alone with a perfect cup of coffee and the uncomfortable realization that he had been thinking about his building manager far more than was appropriate for a man who employed her. Quinton Parker had built his commercial real estate empire from nothing, turning a single neglected office building into a portfolio worth over $200 million. He was 34 years old, ruthlessly good at what he did, and entirely unprepared for the way a simple cup of coffee could derail his entire morning. He tried to focus on the contracts spread across his desk, the acquisition deal that would add 3 more properties to his portfolio, the meeting with investors scheduled for 10. None of it held his attention the way that coffee cup did, sitting there like evidence of something he had not quite acknowledged until now. The coffee was perfect. Exactly right. She had remembered a throwaway comment from months ago and had gone out of her way to get it right without asking a single clarifying question. That meant she had been paying attention. Really paying attention. The thought made something warm spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the coffee he finally took a sip of. It was perfect, of course. Dark and smooth with just enough sweetness to balance the bitter edge. He picked up his phone and texted his assistant, "Clear my schedule for lunch." The response came back immediately. All of it, all of it. He had built an empire by knowing when to pursue an opportunity, and Katherine Miller was beginning to look like the kind of opportunity he could not afford to miss. The problem was that Katherine worked for him, managed his building, and had never given him a single indication that she saw him as anything other than her employer. The professional distance between them was considerable, carefully maintained, and probably wise given their working relationship. None of that stopped him from wanting to know why she had remembered his coffee order, or what it meant that she had gone out of her way to get it exactly right. By the time lunch rolled around, Quinton had convinced himself that he was overthinking everything. It was just coffee. People did nice things for their bosses all the time. It did not mean anything. Then he ran into Katherine in the lobby, literally ran into her as he was heading out, and she was rushing toward the elevator bank with her phone pressed to her ear, and that look of controlled chaos that seemed to be her natural state. She stumbled, he caught her elbow to steady her, and for one brief moment they were close enough that he could smell her perfume, something light and citrusy that cut through the generic lobby air. "Sorry," she said, stepping back quickly. "Plumbing emergency on 12. I have to go." The whole floor, just the executive bathroom, but apparently that is a crisis of biblical proportions. She rolled her eyes, and he caught a glimpse of her humor, the personality she kept carefully hidden behind her professional efficiency. "I'll let you handle it," he said, releasing her arm even though part of him wanted to keep holding on. "You're good at handling crises. That's why you pay me." She smiled, quick and genuine, before disappearing into an elevator. Quinton stood in the lobby for a long moment after she was gone, ignoring the odd looks from people who probably wondered why their CEO was blocking traffic. He had hired Katherine Miller 2 years ago, when his previous building manager had retired. She had walked into the interview with a resume that was impressive but not extraordinary, references that praised her competence, and an air of quiet determination that had convinced him she could handle anything his properties threw at her. She had been 25 then, fresh out of a failed startup where she had apparently been doing everything from facilities management to IT support. She had been honest about the failure, straightforward about what she had learned, and unwilling to make excuses. He had hired her on the spot. For 2 years she had proven him right, handling everything from tenant complaints to major renovations with the kind of calm efficiency that made his life considerably easier. She worked long hours, never complained, and seemed to genuinely care about keeping his building running smoothly. He had noticed her, of course. It would have been impossible not to notice someone who was in and out of his office several times a week, who sent him detailed reports and fielded his 3 a.m. texts about broken heating systems without complaint. But he had kept it professional, kept his distance, because mixing business with anything else was a complication he did not need. The coffee had changed something, though. That small gesture had cracked open a door he had been carefully keeping closed, and now he could not stop thinking about what might be on the other side. He canceled lunch and went back upstairs to his office, pulling up Katherine's employee file on his computer, even though he knew it was probably crossing a line. 27 years old now. Bachelor's degree in business management. Currently lived alone in an apartment 15 minutes from the building. Emergency contact was her sister, Emma Miller. No mention of a boyfriend or partner, but that did not mean anything. Katherine kept her personal life exceptionally private. Quinton closed the file and scrubbed a hand over his face. He was being ridiculous. He was her boss. He paid her salary. Getting involved with her would be complicated at best and a disaster at worst. He needed to forget about the coffee and focus on work. That resolution lasted until 5:30, when Katherine appeared in his doorway looking exhausted and slightly damp. "Please tell me the bathroom situation is resolved," he said, looking up from his computer. Resolved, sanitized, and the executive who called it a biblical crisis has been gently reminded that we have other bathrooms in the building. She leaned against the doorframe, and he noticed the water stains on her blazer, the way her hair was coming loose from its usual neat bun. "You fixed it yourself. The plumber was going to take an hour. I fixed the immediate problem and he can do the permanent repair tomorrow." She shrugged like it was nothing, like getting her hands dirty was just part of the job description. "You're good at this," Quinton said, and meant it. "At plumbing, at everything. Catherine's expression flickered with something he could not quite read. Surprise maybe, or pleasure, or both. "Thank you, that means a lot coming from you." "Why?" The question came out before he could stop it. "Because you built all of this." She gestured vaguely at the office, the building beyond, his entire empire. "You don't give compliments unless you mean them." "How do you know that?" "I pay attention." She said it simply, like it was obvious, and Quinton felt that warm feeling in his chest expand into something bigger. "The coffee this morning," he said. "You remembered my order from months ago." Katherine straightened slightly, her expression shifting back into professional mode. "Is there a problem with it? I can get you something different tomorrow." "No problem. It was perfect." "I'm just wondering why you remembered." For a long moment she just looked at him, and he could see her weighing her response, deciding how much truth to offer. "I remember lots of things," she said finally. "It's part of my job." "Is it part of your job to go to a coffee shop? You never used to get your boss a drink he mentioned once 3 months ago. Maybe I'm angling for a raise." She said it lightly, teasing, but there was something else underneath the humor. "Are you?" "No." The word came out quiet, honest. "I just thought you might appreciate it. You've been working long hours on that acquisition deal. Good coffee helps." "It did help," Quinton said. "More than you know." They stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with something neither of them was quite willing to name. Then Catherine's phone buzzed, shattering the moment, and she pulled back. "I should go. Unless you need anything else, have dinner with me." The words came out before he could second-guess them, direct and clear. Katherine froze. "What? Dinner tonight?" "Not as your boss, just as someone who would like to buy you a meal to say thank you for everything you do." He knew he was bending the truth, knew it was more than gratitude driving the invitation, but he needed to see if she felt even a fraction of what he was feeling. "Mr. Parker." "Quinton." "Please, Quinton," she said, and his name in her mouth sounded better than it had any right to. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not?" "Because you're my boss. Because it blurs lines that should stay clear. Because—" She trailed off, and he saw the conflict on her face, the war between what she wanted and what she thought was appropriate. "Because you feel it too," he finished for her. Katherine closed her eyes briefly. "That's not fair." "I know, but I'm asking anyway." He stood up, moving around his desk but keeping his distance, giving her space to choose. "One dinner. If it's terrible, we forget it ever happened and go back to being professional. But if it's not terrible, if there's something here worth exploring, then we figure it out like adults. And if it complicates everything, then we deal with that too." He meant it. Whatever complications came, he was willing to face them if it meant a chance with her. Katherine looked at him for a long moment, her green eyes searching his face for something. Whatever she found must have satisfied her because she finally nodded. "One dinner. But not tonight. I look like I lost a fight with a plumbing pipe, which I basically did." "Tomorrow, then." "Tomorrow," she agreed. "But Quinton, if we do this, we do it right. No sneaking around, no pretending it's not happening. I won't be anyone's secret." "I wouldn't want you to be." He smiled, feeling something settle into place that he had not known was off balance. "I'll pick you up at 7. You don't know where I live. I'm a resourceful man." Katherine shook her head, but she was smiling now, a real genuine smile that transformed her face from pretty to beautiful. "HR is going to have thoughts about this. Let them. I'll deal with it." She left then, and Quinton stood in his office alone, wondering what he had just started and not caring about the complications, because, for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt genuinely excited about something that had nothing to do with business. The next evening, Quinton found himself nervous in a way he had not been since his first major business pitch a decade ago. He changed his shirt 3 times, second-guessed his restaurant choice twice, and showed up at Catherine's apartment building at 6:55 with flowers, because his mother had raised him right even if his palms were sweating like a teenager on a first date. Katherine lived in a modest complex in a neighborhood that was nice without being flashy, the kind of place where people actually knew their neighbors. He pressed the buzzer for her apartment and waited, suddenly aware that this was crossing a line they could not uncross. "Come on up," her voice crackled through the intercom. "Third floor, apartment 3C. The building was old but well-maintained, and he took the stairs because the elevator looked questionable and he needed to burn off some of his nervous energy. By the time he reached her door, he had almost convinced himself this was a normal situation, and not his heart doing complicated things in his chest. Katherine opened the door before he could knock, and whatever thoughts he had been having evaporated completely. She wore a simple black dress that hit just above her knees, her hair down in loose waves around her shoulders instead of the tight bun he was used to seeing. She had done something with her eyes that made them even more striking, and when she smiled at him, slightly uncertain and completely beautiful, Quinton forgot how to breathe for a moment. "Hi," she said. "Hi." He held out the flowers, a bouquet of wildflowers because roses had seemed too formal, and he remembered her mentioning once that she liked things that looked like they belonged outside. "These are for you." Katherine took them, her fingers brushing his, and he watched her expression soften. "You remembered. I mentioned wildflowers once when we were talking about the landscaping." "I pay attention too," he said, echoing her words from the day before. She invited him in while she put the flowers in water, and Quinton took the opportunity to look around her apartment. It was small but cozy, filled with books and plants and the kind of comfortable furniture that got used rather than displayed. There were photographs on the walls, Katherine with a woman who must be her sister, Katherine at various ages looking happy and alive. "Your place is nice," he said when she came back with the flowers arranged in a simple vase. "It's small. It's you." He meant it as a compliment, and from her smile she took it that way. The restaurant he had chosen was one of his favorites, a small Italian place that focused on food rather than scene. The owner, Marco, greeted Quinton like an old friend and showed them to a quiet table in the back without being asked. "You come here often?" Katherine asked once they were seated. "When I want actual food instead of whatever passes for fine dining these days." Quinton handed her a menu. "Marco's grandmother started this place 40 years ago. The recipes are all hers. No wonder it smells amazing." They ordered wine and appetizers, and for the first few minutes they kept the conversation safe, talking about the building and upcoming projects and neutral topics that kept them in familiar territory. But then Katherine said, "Tell me something that's not about work, something real." Quinton sat back, considering her. "What do you want to know? Why real estate? You could have done anything, built anything. Why buildings?" "My father was a construction worker," Quinton said, the memory coming easy even though he rarely talked about it. "He helped build the Parker Tower downtown when I was a kid. Took me to the site on weekends sometimes, showed me how things went from blueprints to reality. He was so proud of that building even though he was just one of hundreds of workers who built it." "Was?" Katherine asked gently. "He died when I was 16. Heart attack on a job site." Quinton took a sip of wine, the old grief familiar now rather than sharp. "I decided then that I wanted to be the person who created buildings, who gave people like my father something to be proud of. Started small, worked my way up, never forgot where I came from." "That's beautiful," Katherine said, and he could see she meant it. "He would be proud of you." "I hope so." He smiled at her. "Your turn. Why facilities management? It's not exactly what most people dream of doing." Katherine laughed, and the sound made something in his chest feel lighter. You're right, it's not. I wanted to run my own business, had this whole startup idea about sustainable building materials. Raised some money, hired a small team, was convinced I was going to change the world. What happened? Reality. Turns out having a good idea and running a successful business are two very different things. We burned through our funding in 18 months, couldn't get more investment, and ended up closing down. She shrugged, but he could see the old hurt underneath the casual gesture. It was humbling. I was 24 and absolutely certain I knew everything. The universe corrected me fast. But you didn't give up. No, I just got smarter. Took the skills I had learned and found a way to use them that actually paid the bills. Your job posting appeared right when I needed it most. Felt like fate or luck or something. I'm glad you applied, Quinton said. You've made my life considerably easier over the past 2 years. Is that why we're here? Because I make your life easier? She asked it lightly, but he heard the real question underneath. No, he said honestly. We're here because somewhere over the past 2 years you stopped being just my building manager and started being someone I can't stop thinking about. The coffee was just the moment I admitted it to myself. Katherine looked at him, her green eyes searching his face. When did you start thinking about me? Honestly, I don't know exactly. It was gradual, like waking up slowly. One day you were just this efficient person who fixed my problems, and then suddenly I was noticing things. The way you always smell like citrus, how you tap your pen against your tablet when you're thinking, the fact that you can calm down the angriest tenant with just your voice. It all added up until one morning you handed me a perfect cup of coffee, and I realized I was halfway to falling for you. Halfway, Katherine's lips curved into a small smile. I'm working on the other half. Well, she said, reaching across the table to brush her fingers against his. For what it's worth, I noticed you too. Probably before I should have. Definitely before it was professional. Tell me. Katherine's cheeks flushed slightly, but she held his gaze. There was this day about 6 months after I started working for you. The heating system died in the middle of winter, and we had 300 angry people in the building. You came down from your office, rolled up your sleeves, and helped me and the maintenance team fix it instead of just demanding we handle it. You got your hands dirty, listened to what needed to be done, never pulled rank. I remember thinking that you were different from every other executive I had ever met. That's when you noticed me. That's when I started paying attention. Really paying attention. And the more I paid attention, the more I liked what I saw. The way you treat people with respect regardless of their position. How you remember names and ask about families. The fact that you're ruthlessly good at business but never cruel. You're exactly who you appear to be, and that's rare. So we've been circling each other for over a year, Quinton said, turning his hand to properly hold hers. Looks like it. We're both idiots. Professionally cautious idiots, Katherine corrected, but she was smiling now, that full, genuine smile that made his heart do complicated things. Dinner arrived, and they ate and talked, the conversation flowing easy now that the truth was out between them. Quinton learned that Katherine had a sister 3 years younger who was a teacher, that her parents had retired to Florida and called every Sunday without fail, that she was terrible at cooking but great at baking, that she ran 5 miles every morning before work because it was the only time her brain was quiet. He told her about building his first property at 26, about the investors who had believed in him when he had nothing but ambition and a detailed plan, about the failures and setbacks that had taught him more than any success. He told her about his mother who still lived in his childhood home and refused his offers to buy her something nicer, about his younger brother who was a teacher in Chicago and thought Quinton worked too much. They talked until the restaurant was empty and Marco was giving them gentle but clear signals that he wanted to close. And even then, Quinton did not want the evening to end. "Walk with me," he said when they were outside, the city night air cool and clear around them. Katherine slipped her hand into his like. It was the most natural thing in the world, and they walked through downtown, past his buildings and other towers of glass and steel, talking about everything and nothing. "Are you scared?" Katherine asked eventually. "About what this means for work, for everything?" "Terrified," Quinton admitted. "But I'm more scared of not giving this a chance." "Me too." She stopped walking and turned to face him, and they were standing under a streetlight like something out of an old movie. "Quinton, if we do this, it has to be real. I can't be something you keep separate from the rest of your life. And if it doesn't work out, I'll probably have to find another job because I can't imagine working for you if we crash and burn." "So we don't crash and burn," he said simply. "That easy." "Nothing worth having is easy, but I think we're both stubborn enough to figure it out." He reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, letting his hand linger against her cheek. "I want this, Katherine, I want you. Not just for tonight or until it gets complicated, but really." "I want this too," she whispered. "I have for longer than I should probably admit." Quinton kissed her then, soft and careful, a question and an answer all at once. She tasted like wine and possibility, and when she kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest against his chest, he felt something click into place that he had not known was missing. They stood there under the streetlight kissing like teenagers while the city moved around them. And for the first time in his carefully controlled life, Quinton Parker was not thinking about business or strategy or what came next. He was just thinking about the woman in his arms and how perfectly she fit there. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Katherine was smiling at him with such open happiness that he wanted to kiss her again just to feel her smile against his mouth. "I should take you home," he said reluctantly. "You should," she agreed, but neither of them moved. "Tomorrow night?" Quinton asked. "And the night after that? And as many nights as you'll give me. That's a lot of nights. I'm hoping for all of them eventually." Katherine laughed, the sound bright and clear in the night air. "You don't do anything halfway, do you? Not when it matters." He walked her back to her apartment building, and they kissed again at her door, slower this time, taking their time to learn the shape and feel of each other. When she finally pulled back and slipped inside with one last smile, Quinton stood in the hallway for a long moment, feeling like his entire world had just shifted on its axis. He was falling in love with Katherine Miller, and for once in his life, he was not going to overthink it or strategize or treat it like a business deal. He was just going to fall and trust that she would be there to catch him. The next morning, Quinton showed up at the office early, which was normal, but he showed up with coffee from the lobby shop, which was not. He got Katherine's order, the one he had seen her drink from her thermos, and set it on her desk before she arrived. When she walked in 20 minutes later and saw the cup, she stopped and stared at it for a long moment before a slow smile spread across her face. "You remembered," she said, appearing in his doorway with the coffee in her hands. "I pay attention," Quinton said, repeating his words from before. "We're going to have to tell people." Katherine came into his office and closed the door behind her. "I meant what I said about not being a secret." "I know. I'll talk to HR today, make sure everything is documented properly. There might be some restrictions, some rules we have to follow." "I can't report to you directly anymore," Katherine said, "if they let me stay at all." "They'll let you stay. You're too good at what you do. We'll figure out the reporting structure." He stood up and moved around his desk to her. "Katherine, I'm not going to let this cost you your job. If it comes down to it, I'll hire another building manager and you can do something else in the company. Or you can leave and I'll give you the best reference anyone's ever received. But I'm not going to make you choose between your career and this. What about you? Your reputation? I've never cared much about what people think as long as I'm doing the right thing. This feels like the right thing. Katherine set her coffee down and wrapped her arms around him, pressing her face against his chest. He held her close, breathing in her citrus scent, and felt that same sense of rightness that had been growing since yesterday. "We're really doing this," she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. "We're really doing this. It's crazy." "Probably." Quinton pulled back enough to see her face. "Do you want to stop?" "No," she said immediately. "I just want to be prepared for whatever comes. Then we'll be prepared together." The HR meeting later that day was exactly as awkward as Quinton had anticipated. The director, a stern woman named Patricia who had been with his company for 8 years, listened to his explanation with an expression that gave nothing away. "You understand this is complicated," Patricia said once he finished. "We have policies about relationships between supervisors and subordinates. I do understand. That's why I'm here being transparent rather than trying to hide it. I appreciate that." Patricia pulled out a file and started making notes. "Katherine Miller will need to report to someone else effective immediately. She can't be in your direct chain of command. I assumed as much. And you'll both need to sign disclosure forms acknowledging the relationship and agreeing to keep it professional in the workplace." "Done." Patricia looked at him over her glasses. "Mr. Parker, can I speak frankly, please? Katherine is a good employee. Excellent, actually. I've never had a single complaint about her work. But if this relationship goes south, it could create a hostile work environment, and that becomes my problem." "I understand the risk," Quinton said. "I'm not entering into this lightly. Katherine matters to me, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure this works. But if it doesn't, I'll handle it in a way that protects her position and makes sure she's treated fairly." "See that you do." Patricia's expression softened slightly. "For what it's worth, I've worked for you long enough to know you're not the type to play games with people's lives. Just be smart about this." "I will be." Katherine's meeting with Patricia went similarly, and by the end of the day, she was reporting to the operations director instead of Quinton, and they had both signed enough paperwork to prove that, yes, they were in a relationship, and yes, they understood the implications. "Well," Katherine said when they met in the parking garage after work, "that was humiliating in a bureaucratic kind of way." "But done," Quinton said, taking her hand. "No more secrets, no more hiding. People are going to talk. Let them." He kissed her, not caring that they were in a semi-public space where any of his employees might see them. "Let them see that I'm falling for the smartest, most capable woman I've ever met." "You're falling, hard and fast," he admitted. "You." Katherine smiled, that beautiful smile that transformed her whole face. "Yeah, I'm falling too." They went to dinner again that night and the night after that, and soon it became their routine. Quinton would finish work, meet Katherine, and they would go somewhere to eat and talk and learn each other in ways that went deeper than coffee orders and work conversations. He learned that she was fiercely loyal to the people she loved, that she had a temper she kept carefully controlled, that she cried at sad movies and laughed at terrible puns. She learned that he had a sweet tooth he rarely indulged, that he called his mother every Wednesday without fail, that he was quietly generous in ways most people never saw. 3 weeks into officially dating, Quinton took Katherine to meet Marco at the Italian restaurant for a casual dinner. What he did not tell her was that Marco's grandson was getting married and needed a venue, and Quinton had offered one of his properties at cost because Marco had been feeding him and treating him like family for years. "You did that?" Katherine asked when Marco mentioned it, his eyes getting misty with gratitude. "It's just a space," Quinton said, uncomfortable with the attention. "It's not just a space," Marco said firmly. "It's my grandson's wedding, and you made it possible when everywhere else was too expensive." "You're a good man, Quinton Parker." Later, when they were alone, Katherine kissed him in the parking lot with such tenderness that he felt his throat get tight. "What was that for?" he asked. "For being exactly who I thought you were, for being kind when no one's watching, for making me fall harder every single day." "Katherine, I love you," she said, the words simple and true. "I know it's fast and maybe I shouldn't say it yet, but I do. I love you." Quinton pulled her close, his heart feeling too big for his chest. "I love you too." Have for a while now, was just waiting for the right moment to say it. This is the right moment. They stood there holding each other while the city buzzed around them. And Quinton thought about how his carefully controlled life had been completely upended by a woman who remembered his coffee order and fixed plumbing emergencies without complaint. The best things, he was learning, were the ones you did not plan for. Not everything was perfect. There were awkward moments at work when people clearly wanted to gossip about their relationship but did not quite dare. There were complications with Katherine no longer reporting to Quinton directly. Miscommunications that had to get sorted through extra channels. There was one memorable incident where a tenant complained to Katherine about building maintenance and then asked to speak to Quinton when he was unsatisfied, clearly trying to go over her head. Quinton had handled it by firmly supporting Katherine's decision and making it clear that her authority on building matters was absolute regardless of their personal relationship. The tenant had backed down, and Katherine had thanked him by showing up at his apartment that night with Thai food and an admission that she had been scared he would undermine her. "I'll never do that," Quinton promised. "Your professional competence has nothing to do with the fact that I'm in love with you. If anything, I trust your judgment more because I know how good you are at what you do. Even when I'm wrong, you're rarely wrong. But if you are, I'll tell you in private and support you in public." That's how this works. Katherine had kissed him then, deep and grateful, and they had eaten cold Thai food at midnight while she told him about her day and he told her about his. 2 months into their relationship, Quinton took Katherine to meet his mother. Mary Parker still lived in the small house where Quinton had grown up, in a neighborhood that was working class and proud. She answered the door in an apron, her gray hair pulled back, her face lighting up when she saw her son. "Quinton, baby," she said, pulling him into a hug before turning her attention to Katherine. "And you must be the girl he won't stop talking about." "Mom," Quinton said, embarrassed. "Katherine Miller," Katherine said, shaking Mary's hand with a warm smile. "It's wonderful to meet you, Mrs. Parker. Call me Mary, please. Come in, come in. I made pot roast." The house was exactly as Quinton had described it, small and cozy and filled with photographs and memories. Mary fed them until they were stuffed, told embarrassing stories about Quinton's childhood, and asked Katherine questions that were pointed but kind. "So you work for my son," Mary said eventually when they were having coffee in the living room. "I do. I manage his properties." "And that doesn't complicate things." "Mom, it's okay," Katherine said, putting her hand on Quinton's knee. "It does complicate things sometimes, but we've been careful to keep clear boundaries and I'm good at my job regardless of my relationship with your son." "I'm sure you are, honey." "Quinton wouldn't be with someone who wasn't capable. I'm just making sure you're not being taken advantage of. If anything, I'm the one who pursued her," Quinton said. "She tried to keep things professional. I was the one who couldn't let it go." Mary studied them both for a long moment, then smiled. "Good. You need someone who challenges you, who doesn't just go along with everything because you're successful. Your father was like that with me. never let me get away with anything but loved me fierce. That's what a good partnership looks like. I think we have that, Quinton said, looking at Katherine. We do, she agreed. The visit ended with Mary hugging them both and extracting a promise that they would come back soon, and as they drove back to the city, Quinton felt Katherine's hand slip into his. Your mom is wonderful, she said. She liked you. How can you tell? She hugged you goodbye. Mom doesn't hug people she doesn't like, Katherine laughed. Well, I liked her too. She raised a good man. She'd be happy to hear you say that. 3 months became 4, and 4 became 6. And somewhere in there Quinton stopped thinking about Katherine as his girlfriend and started thinking about her as his partner, his future, the person he wanted to build a life with. He started noticing things. The way his apartment felt empty when she was not there. How his day did not really start until he saw her. The fact that every major decision he made, he found himself wondering what she would think about it. He was 34 years old, had built an empire worth hundreds of millions, and he was completely undone by a 27-year-old woman who remembered coffee orders and fixed plumbing emergencies. The realization that he wanted to marry her came quietly, not a dramatic moment but a simple certainty that settled into his bones like truth. They were at his place watching a movie, Katherine tucked against his side wearing one of his shirts, her feet cold against his legs. She was arguing with the movie's plot holes, her hands gesturing as she explained exactly why the heist would not work in reality, and he just looked at her and thought, this forever yes. You're not watching the movie, Katherine said, catching him staring. I'm watching you. Why? Because I'm going to marry you someday and I want to remember this moment. Katherine sat up, her eyes wide. What? Not today, Quinton said quickly. I'm not proposing right now. I don't have a ring, I haven't planned anything, and you deserve better than me blurting it out during a heist movie. But someday, Katherine, I'm going to ask you to marry me, and I really hope you say yes. For a moment she just stared at him, and he worried he had miscalculated, moved too fast, ruined everything. Then she was kissing him, her hands framing his face, and he could taste tears on her lips. I'll say yes, she whispered against his mouth. Whenever you ask, however you ask, the answer will be yes. Quinton held her close, his heart feeling too full, and thought about how a simple cup of coffee 6 months ago had led him here to this moment, to this woman who had somehow become his entire world. He started planning the proposal the next day. It needed to be perfect, needed to be worthy of Katherine, needed to reflect everything they meant to each other. He consulted with his mother, who cried, and then immediately started planning a wedding that did not exist yet. He talked to Katherine's sister Emma, who gave him her blessing and advice about rings. He even asked Marco, who suggested the restaurant but was dismissed because Quinton wanted something more personal. The idea came to him during a facilities meeting. Katherine was presenting a proposal for energy-efficient upgrades to one of his older buildings, and he was watching her command the room with quiet authority when he realized exactly where he wanted to propose, the building where they had first met, the place that had brought them together. The roof, specifically, which had a view of the entire city and was rarely used except for maintenance access. He spent 2 weeks secretly preparing, had maintenance clean and repair the roof space, brought in lights and comfortable furniture, arranged for catering from Marco's restaurant, called in every favor he had to make sure it was perfect. The hard part was getting Katherine up there without tipping her off. He finally managed it by having his operations director send her a maintenance request about the roof access door, something that would not seem suspicious coming from someone else. Quinton watched the clock obsessively the day of, tracking Katherine's movements through the building, timing everything perfectly. When he got the text from security that she was heading to the roof, he nearly sprinted to get there first. He made it with 30 seconds to spare, just enough time to check that everything was in place before the door opened and Katherine stepped out onto the roof. She froze when she saw him standing there among the lights and flowers and the table set for two. "Quinton, what is all this?" "I got a maintenance request. There's no maintenance issue," he said, walking toward her. "I needed to get you up here." "Why?" But she was smiling now, that beautiful smile, and he could see the moment understanding started to dawn. "Because this is where we met. This building, I mean. 2 years ago, you walked into my office for an interview, and I hired you on the spot because I knew you were special. I've spent 2 years working with you, watching you, learning who you are. And then 6 months ago, you brought me a cup of coffee that you had no reason to remember, and I realized I was falling in love with you." "Quinton," her voice broke, her eyes already filling with tears. "You make me better, Katherine. You make me want to be the kind of man who deserves you. You challenge me, support me, love me in ways I didn't know I needed. You remember the small things and handle the big things, and you never let me get away with taking shortcuts or being less than I can be." He pulled the ring box from his pocket and dropped to one knee, and Katherine gasped, her hands covering her mouth. "Katherine Miller, I love you more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. You're my partner, my best friend, my future. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she said immediately, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, of course, yes." Quinton stood up and slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple platinum band with a single diamond that caught the light and sparkled like a promise. Then he kissed her while the city spread out around them, and Katherine kissed him back with such joy that he felt his own eyes get hot. "I love you," she said when they broke apart. "I love you so much. I love you too. Have since you remembered my coffee order." Katherine laughed through her tears. "That's what did it, the coffee. The coffee was when I admitted it to myself. But honestly, I think I started falling the day you fixed that heating system with me. You were so competent and calm, and you looked at me like I was just a person, not a CEO or a boss. Like we were a team." "We are a team," Katherine said, looking at the ring on her finger with wonder. "We've always been a team. Now it's official." They had dinner on the roof under the lights, eating Marco's food and drinking wine and talking about everything. About wedding plans and timelines, and whether they wanted to get married in the city or somewhere else. About combining their lives, their spaces, their futures. About children eventually and what kind of parents they wanted to be. "I want to keep working," Katherine said at one point. "Even after we're married, is that okay? Why wouldn't it be? Some men want their wives at home. I'm not some men, and I've seen you work. You love what you do. I would never ask you to give that up." Quinton reached across the table to take her hand. "Although you might want to consider doing something else eventually, not because of me, but because I know you still have dreams about running your own business. That failed, remember, so try again. You're older now, wiser, and this time you'll have a partner who believes in you and resources to help make it happen." He squeezed her hand. "I'm not saying you have to. I just don't want you to give up on your dreams because one attempt didn't work out." Katherine's eyes filled with tears again. "How are you real?" "I'm real because you make me want to be. You bring out the best in me, Katherine. You always have." They stayed on the roof until late, until the city lights were blazing and the night air turned cool. When they finally left, Quinton took Katherine back to his apartment, which he had been thinking of as theirs for months now, even though she still had her own place. They made love that night with a tenderness that felt different from before, charged with the weight of promises and futures, and forever. And afterwards, Katherine fell asleep in his arms with her engagement ring catching the moonlight from the window, and Quinton lay awake just watching her, overwhelmed with gratitude for coffee orders and second chances. Planning a wedding turned out to be significantly more complicated than planning a business acquisition. There were guest lists to negotiate, venues to choose, family dynamics to navigate. Catherine's parents flew up from Florida and had opinions about everything. Mary Parker had opinions about different things. Catherine's sister, Emma, appointed herself maid of honor and took her duties very seriously. Quinton mostly stayed out of it, offering opinions when asked, but recognizing that this was Catherine's day more than his. His only requirement was that the wedding be relatively soon because he was impatient to start their married life, and saw no reason to wait. They compromised on 6 months, which gave them enough time to plan properly, but did not drag things out unnecessarily. The venue was a historic building that Quinton owned, because Katherine liked the symmetry of getting married in one of his properties. The guest list was kept relatively small, just family and close friends, because neither of them wanted a spectacle. The media got wind of it anyway because Quinton Parker, self-made real estate millionaire, getting married was apparently news. They managed to keep most of the details private, but there were articles and speculation and photographers trying to get pictures. Katherine handled it with the same calm efficiency she brought to everything else, simply ignoring the attention and focusing on what mattered. Quinton fell even more in love with her for that, for her refusal to be rattled by things outside her control. His brother flew in from Chicago 2 days before the wedding, and Quinton took him out for drinks while Katherine had her bachelorette party with Emma and her friends. "So you're really doing this," Ryan Parker said, nursing a beer. "Getting married." "I really am. She's good for you." "I've never seen you this happy." "I've never been this happy," Quinton admitted. "She's everything, Ryan. She makes me want to be better. That's how you know it's right." Ryan clinked his beer against Quinton's. "I'm happy for you, big brother. You deserve this." The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, clear skies and gentle temperatures. Quinton stood at the altar in a tuxedo his mother had fussed over for an hour, his brother beside him as best man, and waited for Katherine to appear. When she did, walking down the aisle on her father's arm in a simple white dress that took his breath away, Quinton felt his throat get tight. She was beautiful, radiant, smiling at him like he was the only person in the room. The ceremony itself was a blur of words and promises and rings. Quinton said his vows, Katherine said hers, and when the officiant pronounced them married, he kissed his wife for the first time and felt like his entire life had been leading to this moment. The reception was joyful and chaotic in the best way. Mary cried through her speech. Emma gave a toast that had everyone laughing and then crying. Marco brought enough food to feed an army, and through it all, Quinton kept one eye on Katherine, watching her laugh and dance and glow with happiness. They danced their first dance to a song they had picked together, swaying slowly while everyone watched, and Quinton pulled her close and whispered, "Best decision I ever made, marrying me. Asking you to dinner that first time. Everything else just followed." "Everything else was inevitable," Katherine said. "Once you kissed me under that streetlight, I was yours. Good, because you're stuck with me now. Promise. Forever promise." They honeymooned in Italy because Katherine had always wanted to go and Quinton had connections that got them into places tourists never saw. They spent 2 weeks eating incredible food, seeing ancient ruins and making love in beautiful hotels. They talked about their future, about the life they wanted to build, about dreams and goals and all the ways they would support each other in achieving them. On their last night, sitting on a balcony overlooking the Mediterranean, Katherine said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me. For taking a chance on us. for being brave enough to risk complicating everything because you thought we might be worth it. We are worth it, Quinton said. We're worth everything. I want to start my own business again, Katherine said suddenly. I've been thinking about it, about what you said. I want to try again, smarter this time, maybe something in sustainable building consulting. I could work with your properties first, build a portfolio, then expand. I think that's brilliant, Quinton said, and I'll help however you need. Funding, connections, advice, whatever it takes. You really believe in me, always have. From the moment you walked into that interview. They flew home to start their married life, moving Katherine's things into Quinton's penthouse apartment and making space for both of them. Katherine gave notice at her building management position, and Quinton helped her set up her new consulting business. She called it Miller Sustainability Solutions, keeping her maiden name for business because she had earned her reputation under it. Her first client was Quinton's portfolio, consulting on energy efficiency upgrades across all his properties. But word spread fast, and soon she had other clients, other projects, a business that was growing faster than she had anticipated. Quinton watched her thrive with pride, saw her confidence grow as she proved to herself that the first failure had been a learning experience rather than a verdict on her abilities. He helped when she asked, stayed out of the way when she did not, and mostly just loved her for being brave enough to try again. A year into their marriage, Katherine came home with news that changed everything. "I'm pregnant," she said, the test still in her hand. Quinton stared at her, at the test, at her face which was equal parts terrified and excited. Then he was crossing the room and pulling her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "We're having a baby," he said, testing the words. "We're having a baby," she confirmed. "Are you happy?" Happy doesn't even begin to cover it. He pulled back to look at her, to see the tears in her eyes that matched his own. "I'm terrified and thrilled and so in love with you I can barely breathe." "Good," Katherine said, laughing through her tears. "Because I'm all of those things too." The pregnancy was relatively easy, and Katherine worked right up until her 8th month before finally agreeing to slow down. Quinton fussed over her constantly, driving her crazy with his overprotectiveness, but also making her feel cherished in ways she had never experienced. Their daughter was born on a Tuesday morning in September, 7 pounds and perfect in every way. They named her Grace Mary Parker, after Quinton's mother and the word that described how Quinton felt about his life now. Holding his daughter for the first time, with Katherine exhausted but glowing in the hospital bed, Quinton thought about how far he had come from that morning when Katherine had walked into his office with a perfect cup of coffee. How one small gesture of kindness and attention had led to this, to a family, to a life he had not known he was missing. "What are you thinking?" Katherine asked sleepily. "That I need to send a thank you note to that coffee shop." "Why?" "Because if they had not been running a promotion that day, you never would have gone there to get my order, and I might have taken years longer to figure out I was in love with you." Katherine laughed softly. "It wasn't the coffee shop, Quinton. It was always going to be us. Coffee just moved up the timeline. Maybe, but I'm still grateful for it." Grace grew from infant to toddler, and their family settled into a rhythm that worked. Katherine ran her business from home mostly, taking on projects she could manage with a young child. Quinton adjusted his schedule to be home more, delegating responsibilities he would have jealously guarded before, because family mattered more than any deal. They moved to a bigger place when Grace was 2. A house in a good neighborhood with a yard and room to grow. Mary Parker became a constant presence, spoiling her granddaughter and giving Quinton and Katherine breaks when they needed them. On Grace's 3rd birthday, Quinton found Katherine in their daughter's room after the party had ended, watching Grace sleep with an expression of such love and contentment that it made his heart ache. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "More than okay. Perfect." She leaned back against him when he wrapped his arms around her waist. "I was just thinking about how different life is from what I expected. Different good or different bad. Different amazing. I thought I had my whole life planned out. Startup success, maybe marriage eventually, the standard path. But then I failed and took a job managing buildings and met you. And now I have this life that's better than anything I could have planned. I know what you mean. I thought success was buildings and money and empire. Turns out it's this. It's you and Grace and Sunday morning breakfasts and all the little moments in between." "We're disgustingly happy," Katherine said. "We really are. Think it'll last. I think we'll make sure it lasts. We're both too stubborn to let it fall apart." He turned her around to face him. "I love you, Katherine Parker. Every single day I love you more than the day before. Every single day I'm grateful you remembered my coffee order. I love you too. Every single day." She kissed him, soft and sweet. "Thank you for taking that chance on us." "Best risk I ever took." Years passed, as they do. Grace grew older, started school, developed her own personality that was equal parts Katherine's determination and Quinton's strategic thinking. Katherine's business thrived, becoming one of the top sustainability consulting firms in the region. Quinton's portfolio grew, but he learned to balance ambition with presence, success with family. They had their challenges, as any marriage does. There were arguments about parenting styles and business decisions and whose turn it was to handle the broken dishwasher. There were stressful periods when work was overwhelming for both of them. There were sleepless nights with a sick child and exhausting days that tested their patience. But through it all, they remained a team. They talked through problems instead of letting them fester. They made time for each other, even when time was scarce. They remembered why they had fallen in love and worked to keep that love alive and growing. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinton took Katherine back to the roof where he had proposed. It looked different now, officially renovated into an event space that Katherine's company had consulted on. But the view was the same, the city spreading out endless and bright. 10 years, Katherine said, looking out at the skyline. Best 10 years of my life, even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts. They proved we can handle anything together. Quinton pulled her close. "I'd do it all again, every moment, just to end up here with you. Sweet talker. Truth teller." He kissed her temple. "Thank you for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for taking a chance on me." "You made it easy," Katherine said. "You saw me, really saw me, and loved what you found. How could I not say yes to that?" They stood there holding each other as the sun set over the city. Two people who had found each other through coffee and conversation and careful attention. Two people who had built a life together brick by brick, moment by moment, choice by choice. And when they finally headed home to their daughter and their life and their future, they went together, hand in hand, the way they had been doing for 10 years and would continue doing for all the years to come. Because some love stories start with grand gestures and dramatic moments. But the best ones, the ones that last, start with someone paying attention, with someone noticing the small things and caring enough to remember. They start with perfect coffee and grow into perfect lives, built by two people who choose each other every single day. And for Quinton and Katherine Parker, that choice had made all the difference.